The Tartarus program, despite achieving half its stated objectives, was deemed a complete failure based on the results, a DMIA. Saya Ryusenji, one of the first people to mind link with a Digimon, was also the first person to go DMIA before the term existed. According to the logs from the Tartarus probe, the mission proceeded smoothly enough at first. Palmon, Tentamon, and Agumon cruised through the vast networked sea on their very own virtual vessel, which their human partners controlled using Kosuke's suite of tools. Yulin, Kosuke, and Saya fancied themselves astronauts orbiting the moon, but in practice they were more akin to deep-sea explorers plumbing the depths in their submersible. Their visibility certainly wasn't as good as it would be in space, for one thing, and the team had yet to figure out how to capture sufficiently crisp visual data. Not even the exceptionally strong mind link between Agumon and Saya could be captured adequately by the comparatively low-fidelity technology of the day, limiting the amount of information the team stood to gain. They may as well have been trawling the seafloor with little more than a small flashlight to guide them. The Digimon pressed on, following the route that was programmed for them through the vast sea of junk data and digital noise. Yulin and Kosuke still don't know exactly what went wrong on the Tartarus probe. Something happened, but they couldn't make out what. The only one who would have seen whatever happened in the blurry black, white mush of a video feed was Saya. She alone would have seen a meaningful packet, or some sort of malicious code execution, or perhaps something that qualified as sentient. A Digimon, perhaps? Whatever it was hostile. Even now, Yulin doesn't have anything to add to the story, given the limited data she had to work with. She was there when it happened, yes, but she didn't see or hear anything that would crack the mystery wide open. If forced, she would say she had a bad feeling just before it happened, but feelings aren't quantifiable data. All she knew was that Saya and Agumon's signals had disappeared by the time she came to. She remembered it was at the turning point of the mission, when they were plotting out their closest approach to the digital world. Some sort of malicious code or AI entity had attacked them, for lack of a better term. It's possible Saya's Agumon had been the target all along. Although, suppose it had all been an unfortunate accident? Like a ship ramming into an iceberg or a large sea creature, and sinking. There was nothing concrete to hang on to. All Yulin remembered was Kosuke's panic when confronted with the unforeseen circumstances. His fiancée's signal was gone, swallowed by some unseen monster, to hear him tell it. Their partner Digimon were only doing what they were programmed to do. Kosuke fought for Saya's inclusion as a one-woman survey team. Maybe if he had been the survey team instead, or activated manual controls and pulled her closer. But Kosuke didn't have that power. Professor Ryusenji did. The Tartarus probe was heavily damaged and barely functional. Palmon and Tentamon were injured as well. Right or wrong, the professor prioritized Kosuke and Yulin's safe return, so they wouldn't be tempted to try and rescue Saya. He couldn't risk all three of them going DMIA on the very first mission. Shu Yulin, now a squad leader with the Digipolice, stood in the DDL lobby within Aberdeen Electronics. The wall-sized display rotated through its carousel of seasonal nature footage while she waited. Several years separated her from the failure of the Tartarus program. Years full of nights spent turning over the events of that mission in her mind. She and Kosuke returned to the real world to find Saya's comatose body lying beneath a sheet. Analysis of the mission data showed that her consciousness remained in Agumon's Digicore, which itself disappeared from the site of the accident. Their best guess was that the Digicore had been taken somewhere else within the digital world. Saya was officially DMIA's first person on record to go missing in the digital world. With the benefit of hindsight, the why was obvious. She'd run out of time, her consciousness fused with Agumon's Digicore, and nobody knew what became of either of them. Even after all this time, they still had no idea where Digimon who went DMIA ended up. The processes developed for the Tartarus program were evaluated across multiple measures. Though the footage was exceedingly noisy, that there was footage of the digital world at all was deemed a success. The scripts used to control the Digimon were an overwhelming success. Yulin and Kosuke returned safely, but Seiya was DMIA. Over half of the stated goals were accomplished, but the loss of a crew member outweighed all of that. How could it be seen as anything other than a disastrous failure? There was nothing Yulin or Kosuke could have done. They didn't see or hear anything out there in the vast sea that was the network. All they knew was that Seiya was gone when they came to. They sent a person with a record of incomplete mind links out on a mission with a rookie Digimon. Mere babies learning to totter along on their own 2 feet when they weren't sitting in a stroller. They should have been more careful. They should have built more contingencies into the plan. They had no idea how intelligent these life forms would be. Yulin thought she had a grasp of how risky it all was. She understood they were essentially trying to contact aliens. Somewhere deep inside, she believed the digital world was the next frontier for humanity to conquer. That Digimon were beneath humans. They were so consumed with thoughts of developing bleeding-edge technology to scale all the unknown hurdles that would stand in their way, working out approaches to deal with problem areas and potential hostile contact, that their communication withered and their imaginations narrowed. And now, Seiya was gone. Her body was sent to the university hospital, where she never woke up from her coma. Her consciousness, her very essence, had been forcibly severed from her body. No one could quite pronounce her dead, but she wasn't alive either. Yulin wasn't sure the gods could even make a judgment call on that one. Professor Ryusenji did everything he could to keep Seiya in stable condition and keep his students safe. He kept the Tartarus program and its mind-link experiments going in secret to shield Yulin and Kosuke from the inherent risks. He had to ensure his research had a future, and they were key to its survival. The lengths he went to ensure his students were safe, despite the loss of his daughter, earned the respect of the small handful of staffers he briefed on the situation. Yulin couldn't remember the last time she saw Kosuke, was it? Really, when he went to visit Seiya in the hospital, right after the accident? But she often wondered what became of him. He stopped coming to school and work, which was perfectly understandable. Before long, he stopped picking up the phone, answering emails, or so much as acknowledging her existence. It had been some time since she'd heard anything about him from Professor Ryusenji either. "You're sending her to America?" Yulin recalled asking in disbelief. "There's a hospital that specializes in treating coma patients. They can care for her while minimizing the harm to her body." "But I know. We won't be able to visit her. Not as easily anyway." "Perhaps that's for the best, though. A student of your caliber shouldn't be brought to a standstill like this. You'll risk not graduating." "What about Kosuke?" "I've spoken with him. He's decided to drop out. It was simply a matter of timing for him as well. I will support him however I can." Time stopped for her and Kosuke after the accident, as did, as far as they knew, the Tartarus program and research into the digital world. Both were frozen at Professor Ryusenji's directive. She, Kosuke, and the professor were now scattered to the wind, and they couldn't do much more than worry about one another. She wondered if it was healthy for the professor to have thrown himself so completely into his research. Seiya was a part of the lab. She couldn't bring herself to try and contact Kosuke after he closed himself off from her. She figured it would be too painful, and Professor Ryusenji became too commanding a presence. She felt she couldn't engage him in silly conversations anymore. Something suddenly appeared at the edges of Yulin's field of view, snapping her out of her trip down the rabbit hole of days long gone. A hololized sphere. 3 of them, in fact, each marked with one of the 3 Digimon attributes: vaccine, virus, and data. They quietly rotated around, overlapping each other in places before completely disintegrating and vanishing without a trace. She wasn't any closer to an answer after all these years, but she couldn't tear herself away from the digital world. She'd just traded her lab coat and name tag for a uniform and a badge.